Alrighty, hello everyone. Welcome to the Life Science Cafe. My name is Katie Schrader, and I'm a PhD candidate at the Organismic and Evolutionary Biology program in University of Massachusetts, Amherst. I'm going to be the MC for tonight's cafe. Life Science Cafe was established in 2011 and is organized by graduate student researchers at UMass. And every month, we invite experts to share and discuss their research. Typically, we host these events in the Amherst community, but for the time being, we're going to be continuing our efforts virtually. We would like to thank our funders, the Organismic and Evolutionary Biology program, the Graduate Students Senate, and the Graduate School at UMass, the National Science Foundation, and our generous UMass Gives donors. You can subscribe to our mailing list from our website to stay tuned on any future cafes. During the webinar tonight, we're going to break to adjust questions from the audience at multiple specific time points. And if you have a question for our speaker, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in your questions. You can add these questions at any time. It doesn't have to be just during the Q&A period. If you would like to instead ask your question out loud, please use the raise your hand function, which is also at the bottom of your screen during those Q&A periods. And also, just so you know, we are recording tonight's webinar to share online later. So this year is the Life Science Cafe's 10th anniversary, and we are celebrating by inviting back former members of the organization committee to be our speakers. So tonight, we are very excited to host Dr. Aaron Grade, who completed his PhD at UMass in 2020. After leaving UMass, Aaron spent a year as a postdoctoral researcher at Clark University in Worcester, Mass. And he is currently an American Association for the Advancement of Science Fellow with the Department of Energy in DC. So tonight, Aaron is here to talk to us about how urbanization affects wildlife. So welcome, Aaron. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you. I'm doing great. It was about 70 degrees down here in the DC area today, but it's going to drop back down a little later. So I'm learning DC area weather. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so.
That sounds excellent.
Yeah, it's something to get used to. Let me just see if I could share my screen here.
So we're going to get started tonight with a little bit of some audience participation.
All right.
So we have some questions that we would like you to answer. And so I'm about to launch a poll for you. And you should see on your screen 2 questions that you can answer. And then we will be able to see how everybody has responded. So I'll give you a few moments to answer those questions. Yeah, it was really warm in Massachusetts here today too, but man, 70 would be really nice.
Yeah, but the second it snows down here, everyone just shelters in place and abandons their vehicles and things. So it's kind of funny. That's what I hear anyway.
Yeah, Massachusetts knows how to deal with the snow. All right, just a couple more seconds here. We've got almost everybody responding. Thank you very much for your participation. All right, so I'm going to share our results from everybody's responses with you. So Aaron, can you just take us through this first question here and what the answer is?
Sorry about that. Yeah, sure. Let's see here. I'm not seeing the poll question. Oh, I see it. Okay. So what is the most abundant irrigated cultivated plant in the United States by land area? And we picked corn, wheat, turfgrass, or soy. And I think one kind of stands out from the others. So maybe the audience took a cue for that, or I'm sure they're just extremely bright. So yep, they chose turf grass as the single most abundant irrigated cultivated plant in the United States. And they're correct about that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And we won't reveal the answer to question 2, but question 2 is how many birds are killed by domestic cats each year in the US? And the options were 120,000, 450,000, 1.7 million, or 2.4 billion.
Okay, so it looks like everybody or most people so far picked 1.7 million. So we will see if you were all correct. All right. So we will come back to that second question again later, as Aaron has mentioned. But so tonight I want to kind of get started here by just asking generally kind of what is ecology? So, we hear that term thrown around a lot, but really what exactly are we talking about here?
Right, that's a good question. And before we start, I'm learning this through my fellowship with the federal government, is you have to be really careful about things. So I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm here on my own behalf as, my own personal opinions. I'm not speaking for the DOE or USGCRP or AAAS or any of those other acronyms. So just me today. And cute baby birds on the right there to sort of like soften that blow. So what is ecology? They ask us this on our qualifying exams, which is a lot of fun. And the most simple answer is that ecology is the interaction between organisms like each other and then also the environment. And when I say environment, I mean abiotic things that are not part of the biotic space. So things like wind, rain, rocks, etc. And a lot of people, when they think of ecology and think of ecologists, they think about them studying birds, plants, trees, mountain ecosystems out in sort of like what most people would consider pristine nature. But it turns out the ecology is everywhere, and it's even here. On your street corner here, you've got, if you notice, you have organisms, including humans, and then you also have abiotic environment, which can include the built environment as well, things that we build.
Cool. So ecology is basically just all living things, right? And you just mentioned that, people in their minds kind of have this distinction between these like pristine environments and then these kind of more city life environments. So as an urban ecologist, how do you define an urban space versus a natural space?
That's a great question. And we get this a lot. And it's when people hear the word urban, there's a certain thing that comes to mind. Maybe it's the center of New York City or the center of Boston. And so they picture maybe me as an avian ecologist standing there in New York City with binoculars looking at pigeons, which actually is quite okay. And there's been some really cool genetic studies on pigeons in New York City, and the uptown and downtown pigeons are genetically distinct, but we'll leave that for another day. But the urban ecology really encompasses just how ecosystems interact with humans, and especially humans where they live and where they work. So you think of like residential and commercial sorts of areas, but it's kind of broadened out too to across something that we call an urbanization gradient or an urban gradient. And it's not always quite as neat as this, but let's take the Pioneer Valley, for example. We've got like downtown Springfield. And then as you move out, you'll see like pretty high density suburbs. And then you get into lower density suburbs. And as you move out further and further, you'll get into more rural areas, or urban ecologists call them exurban areas. So that might be farmland, forests, and then rural housing, of course. People live out in rural areas too. So the field of urban ecology is really about understanding how these sorts of human environments interact with ecosystems.
Cool. So your research is kind of connecting ecology with these urban landscapes. And so I guess one question then is, what are some of the most common impacts that humans have on the environment?
That's a great question. The biggest thing is we're kind of ecosystem engineers. So you think of like a beaver as changing the environment to suit their needs, and humans have done a tremendous job of doing that. Like I said, like turf grass takes up a huge proportion of the United States, which is amazing. And it's not really something that would have happened if we weren't there. Same thing with something called impervious surface, which are surfaces that are that water can't really go through. So concrete, asphalt, buildings, those sorts of things. So we really kind of engineer our own environment. And of course, we change the more natural aspects too. We'll plant trees, and the trees aren't necessarily native to the area. They might be imported from somewhere else. And we even bring animals along with us. Like, I think they say that like we brought a ton of the Shakespearean birds over when colonizers came over to Europe and just sort of released them. So there's all sorts of interesting ways that we change the environment. And yeah, that's a lot of what conservation biologists are interested in as well.
So I guess kind of, can you like speak to the importance of this? Like what kind of a scale are we changing our environment on?
Yeah, for sure. And for a while, urban ecology is relatively new, and it hasn't really caught on because people like to have a separation in their minds between nature and the human areas. Like this place is natural, so ecologists love to go to the most pristine places possible and study their ecosystems and learn how they work without human intervention, which I think is really interesting as well. But the reality of the world is that there isn't really anywhere at this point that isn't touched by humans in some way. So this is a map of the US published by Bloomberg, and they sort of clumped all the different land uses in the US together. And the first thing that's striking about this is look at how much land is for cows. So, maybe you've heard that like reducing your meat consumption fights climate change, and it also fights land use conversion. And then other things you'll notice is when you're thinking about urbanization, you think of housing and commercial development. And if you look at how much of the area in pink up there in the top right and red is dedicated to rural housing, urban commercial, and urban housing, it takes up the entire Northeast and part of the Mid-Atlantic worth of land area in the US. And that definitely isn't land that we can ignore. So we need to understand urban ecosystems in order to think about how the world is going to look in the future. And another reason we need to understand about urban ecosystems predicting into the future is because this is where we're all going to be. So if you look for the vast majority of human history, more people lived in rural areas than in urban areas. And then around 2007 or so, it switched. And from now on, more people live in urban environments, which in a way is a good thing. As our population grows, we want to sort of densify, because if we all just kept spreading out and took up a huge amount of space, there wouldn't be any sort of natural areas left. But also, you really want to think about in the future, not only conserving these ecosystems for biodiversity, but also for people. So a big thing in urban ecology is we're thinking about people. We're thinking about things like environmental justice and equity, and the fact that these are places people live, and there are consequences to how we build infrastructure and how we set up the natural infrastructure as well in these areas and green spaces. And it's all nice to say, oh, we could probably cram a ton of people into one space and separate them from nature and have nature be over here and be preserved. But what kind of life is that? Ask yourself if you would want to live a life like that. And especially recently, a lot of attention is being paid to the fact that it's no accident that certain people, certain socioeconomic statuses and races and other factors end up living in the places where there's more pollution, there's less access to green space. So part of urban ecology is understanding ecology, not just of the city, but for the city. So allowing for people to have a stake in the nature that they're exposed to every day, and for them to be able to experience a good quality of life while also trying to preserve nature as best as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. This absolutely matters for humans as well as the wildlife. So I'm curious though, actually, what kinds of wildlife are actually impacted by this? So when I think of a city animal, I think of like a pigeon and a raccoon maybe, but what kinds of animals are we talking about here?
Sure. So first of all, it is surprising how many animals can live in a city. And especially if we extend the definition of urban to being across that urban gradient into like urban, suburban, and then exurban or rural. And there are places in the world where humans and let's say leopards live side by side in cities. So it's pretty amazing. But today we're mainly going to focus on birds. And that's because, yeah, I love birds, you love birds, but also they're extremely important indicator species for what's happening in the environment. They're really responsive to their environments, and they're really good at sort of finding their niches in environments. So, and also they're a lot easier to study because they're diurnal. They're, well, not all birds, but a lot of birds are out during the day. They're easier to spot than, let's say, mammals. Like, as excited as scientists are about going out and studying mammals, you mostly set up cameras and wait for something to walk by. Whereas birds, you can observe them pretty easily in their environment because they're out there. And we'll talk about it a bit later, but there's a lot of citizen science around birds too, like eBird and other things. People get really excited. And they're also a great sort of conservation message because people love birds. They feed, almost everyone feeds birds in their backyards. So, but they're also in trouble. So this was released recently, and we found that 2.9 billion birds have disappeared since 1970. There's a drastic decline in bird species. And there are many theories to why this is. And a lot of it rests on things like land conversion, their habitat going away. And then there's also this sort of speaks to possibly an insect crisis as well, because a lot of birds eat insects or feed insects to their young. So this crash in the bird population might be due to that as well. So, just thinking about birds as a way to study urbanization is a great stepping stone, even though even though a lot of papers are about bird species, recently more and more is being done on things like mammals, insects, and other things.
Cool. So I just want to give everybody a heads up that we're going to get in a little bit more deep into Erin's specific research in just a moment. But before that, we're going to have a break real soon for our first Q&A session. So if you have any questions that are starting to come up, just generally about urbanization and birds, please add those to the Q&A. But before we get there, I have one more question for Erin. So I'm curious kind of what all of the factors are for these backyard birds. So what things are really harming them, their numbers, their behaviors, and what changes in behaviors are happening in response to that?
Sure, that's a great question. And it's something we're still trying to answer in a lot of ways. There are things that we know are harming them, but on the other hand, the more we really dig into urban ecology, it's sort of surprising how well some species are doing, even species that you wouldn't really expect due to urbanization. Like people often think urban equals bad, but also humans are providing a lot of resources in a lot of ways, like if they plant gardens, those sorts of things. So some species are actually thriving. So I have a few examples of urban birds, and I wouldn't say that all of these are necessarily thriving, and it's actually really hard because you have to really understand how the populations are doing at all the different levels, including while they're for migratory birds while they're migrating, and then where they end up settling down during the winter season. But we could answer questions about that. So a couple birds, I think people who have backyards in relatively suburban to rural areas might have seen bluebirds. So they'll live in something called nest boxes that people could set up in their yards. So a lot of people even like build birds little homes in their yards and really enjoy that. Some of the predator birds do really well, like falcons. They really love the plentiful amount of squirrels and pigeons we provide, and the really tall buildings where they can nest and then swoop down. And then some more unexpected species like forest dwelling species like wood thrush can live in little forest patches in Amherst, for example. But we're still trying to determine if those forest patches are truly supporting them, or if it's really a sink population where they're going there and thinking it's a good place to nest, and then they end up not doing well. That's called an ecological trap. When a species goes somewhere for certain cues, like, oh, that looks like a great place to settle down, and then in reality, it's not great, and then they end up not being very successful.
Excellent. That's I guess sounds kind of scary if it's a trap. Okay, so I'd like to open the floor to questions. So please add any questions that you have into the Q&A, and we will ask Aaron your questions. And don't forget that if you don't want to type in your questions, you can also use the raise hand function, which is also at the bottom of your screen. And then we will unmute you and allow you to verbally ask your question. So actually, I have another question while we're waiting for folks to add things to the Q&A. So I'm wondering, so it seems like if we're humans are going in and changing these environments, that it's all a negative thing. But is that really the case? Is there any way that urbanization has actually benefited birds?
Yeah, well, it's really it's what your perspective is. So if you're someone who really enjoys like your like deep forest sorts of birds, or your like farm, like grassland kinds of birds, you might be disappointed to hear that a lot of them are on the decline. But on the other hand, house sparrows are doing great, and so are European starlings, and those are not native to the United States. But for some people who let's say live in a city and those are the only birds they see, they get excited about them and they build little boxes. They're like doing amazing. So it's all based on your perspective. But there are some instances where it's like really hard for us when we're trying hard to point to like, is urbanization really hurting their populations? And sometimes it's kind of hard to see that because bird species are often so adaptable that they're sort of like adapting to the new environment that we're building for them.
So I'm also wondering about we talked about all of these birds that were being lost. Does that include the predatory birds too? Are they also at risk?
Yeah, I mean, they are, and it kind of depends. Like in conservation circles, there's a common mantra that like specialists do worse than generalists. So I know that there's some birds that just will go after anything, just about, like, I don't know, like a red-tailed hawk. You see them all over the place. They won't go after anything, but like they'll go after a lot. Whereas something like an American kestrel, has a very special habitat need. And there's actually a great organization called the Kestrel Land Trust that in the Amherst area that builds nest boxes for kestrels. And I think they need like large like grassland type areas, right? And they hunt like grasshoppers and other small critters like that. So yeah, and it does seem like there's some strange things too. Like we are reforesting the Northeast, so a lot of grassland birds are on the decline around here. And they used to be doing really well because of all the sorts of farms and things. So yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes it's very context specific. You can't really generalize too much.
Sure. And so just a quick question we've got in the chat. So are those bird loss numbers from North America, or is that the whole world?
I believe that's North America, and correct me if I'm wrong, but let me double check here. Yeah, it's North America. Yep.
So that means that the numbers are probably even more staggering. That's
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And that's individuals in the populations, not species. That'd be a crazy amount of species.
Right.
Yeah.
So it looks like we've got some more questions in the chat that are related to how we as humans can help our urban wildlife, and maybe we'll address those in a later Q&A session. And so I think right now we're going to move on in the interest of time, and we will come back to those shortly.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So now, Aaron, I want to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of your actual research. So can you tell us kinds of what birds did you work with for your graduate research, and kind of what types of things did you do on a day-to-day basis as a graduate student?
Sure. So as a graduate student at UMass, I was, an urban ecologist in residential areas, and I studied birds and mammals, but one thing that I really wanted to focus on was animal behavior, that I've always had an interest in behavior. And I was studying something called landscapes of fear, which sounds really intense and interesting. And it's basically how fear influences behavior and how that can influence entire populations. I think I forgot to mention some of the impacts on birds before, and I want to make sure I get to this too. So like common predators, and I'm gonna get up here on my soapbox for a minute, and then I'll step down after. But cats, outdoor cats are one of the biggest human impacts on birds. And I think we had that poll question earlier, right? And what was the answer that everyone said?
Everybody said 1.7 billion.
Right. So it's between 1.4 and 3.7 billion, which is absolutely mind-boggling how many birds. And that's it's because they're born predators. They're really good at it. Even if they're not hungry, even if they're, they'll go out and they'll kill. And so one of the biggest things you can do for bird conservation is to keep your cats inside, keep them indoors. And this is coming from a proud cat dad. So here's one of my cats, Torty, and then I also have a cat, Polly, and they're both indoor cats, and they're super happy. And actually, as a cat owner, I wouldn't want them outside because it's not a great life for them, honestly. It seems like it would be natural and all that, but like there's territory issues, and cats get beaten up all the time by other cats, and they get run over by cars, and their lives are shorter and they're less healthy when they're outside. And I understand some people, I've heard from people who are like, my cat, I found them, they're outside, they can't stay inside, I can't keep them inside. That's okay. I mean, preferably we'd want them inside, but worst case scenario, next time you have a cat, if you get a new cat, just like start them off with being inside. I could assure you, if they have playtime and everything, they'll be happy watching the birds from outside, from inside the window looking out. But anyway, I'll step down off my soapbox. Yeah, so I'm really interested in predators and fear effects, specifically of being scared of predators. And this is called top-down effects. So predators in trophic dynamics, which is like eating, trophic. Top-down is the effects that predators have on on an animal. And in this case, believe it or not, there's two types of predators. So there's the predators that eat the adult birds, so hawks, owls, those sorts of things. And then there's a surprising number of animals that eat bird eggs and bird nestlings. It's like a little nest, a nice packet of protein for them to eat. So you'll even see like deer browse on bird eggs and nestlings, which is kind of disturbing. But things like bear, the most common ones though are the small mammals and the mesopredators, so raccoons, skunks, chipmunks, squirrels, those sorts of things. And then the other thing I'm interested in, we'll talk about a bit later, is the resources that the birds use. So bottom up, which is like, bird seed and have like the habitat sorts of things. So here's a collection of birds that I've studied. I'm going to touch a little bit on my master's work down at University of Florida, which was with cardinals and titmice. You could see them up in the top right. And you probably recognize a lot of these, you've seen them. But my main study species, other than the two predators down there, Cooper's hawks and the screech owls, is the house wren, the lowly house wren. And I'm sure a lot of people who have nest boxes in their backyards and want to attract bluebirds or chickadees are really annoyed by house wrens. But I really love them because they're really tolerant to study. They're a really interesting bird in that they have the widest range in the Americas of any other bird, and they're pretty much insectivorous. So they're a good proxy for, like, again, what's going on with the inverts, the arthropods or the insects. Yeah, so I think those are the things I study.
So what is this? What's your general kind of day-to-day research collection look like?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately nowadays I'm not doing ecology at all, and we'll talk about that a bit later. I'm in like a policy position, which is super interesting, but I really enjoy the work of being an ecologist. And I think a lot of people do, because you get to do a little bit of everything. You get to be outside. So there I am, like, doing a vegetation survey. And then you also get to work in the lab. So we use these funnels to see what parasites were in the bird nests, the house wren nests, something called ectoparasites, just like mammals can get fleas and ticks and lice and all that gross stuff. So do birds. So we're studying if there's any differences in the ectoparasites in birds' nests between urban and rural. And then, of course, you get to spend a lot of time on your computer doing Zoom meetings or coding a lot of like statistics that you aren't really told at the very beginning of wanting to be a wildlife biologist, but you learn a lot of modeling and coding, which is pretty cool.
Wow, so that sounds like a pretty wide variety of things that you might be doing day to day. That sounds kind of fun. So, can you tell us about some of your specific projects that you worked on at UMass and at Florida?
Sure. So I'll go to Florida first. So I did my master's at University of Florida. So I learned how to do the gator chomp and say go Gators and live in atrocious heat. And I was started getting interested in human impacts on this study, because these are 3 state parks that are really nice in north central Florida. And you notice the gray line there is a highway, I-75. And I'm sure you all have had this experience while hiking. You want to like enjoy yourself in a nice, like seemingly remote area, but you hear the blast of just constant traffic going by, because there's a highway right near the state park or state forest. And so I was interested in how highway noise is influencing bird behavior and communication. It's honestly, sound pollution is a real thing, and it penetrates a lot deeper than other types of pollution into seemingly pristine environments. So my study setup was basically like this. So again, I'm bringing the fear and the predators in. So birds communicate a lot with each other, and you hear this whenever you're out for a walk in the woods. They're making all sorts of calls and songs, and I was particularly interested in alarm calls, because it's a really important thing for birds. So birds give each other alarm calls to communicate that there's risk. specifically risk of a predator. And interestingly, a lot of birds eavesdrop on other species alarm calls. So at first we thought that, species communicate with each other, their kin or their group. And it turns out that a lot of different species eavesdrop on alarm calls. And one bird that's particularly noisy is the tufted titmouse. Tufted titmice are always speaking to each other. That's the gray one with a little tuft on the left there. And they're always communicating with each other about what the risk is in their environment. And they have this really something called a high seat call. It's like a seat, like really imperiled sort of call that means there's a hawk about to strike. So it's a really important alarm call to understand. It turns out so many different birds in the forest understand this call. And even chipmunks do. They'll all evade basically because they know that a hawk is about to dive down and get them. And one bird that responds to this is the northern cardinal on the right there. So if you're a male especially, you're bright red, conspicuous bird. And so what do they do when they hear the seat call is they freeze. They turn into a brick, I call it. They don't move. And they really they don't move at all. They might do a tiny little call to their mate or something, but they'll stay still for several minutes. So it's very obvious. So I took advantage of the system to see if there's a breakdown in communication because of the road noise. Like if you're sitting in a busy stadium, or sorry, a loud stadium at a Gators football game, and your buddy's like talking to you next to you, you might not really be able to hear them. So thinking about that, I did an experiment where I played the titmouse call to cardinals, either near highway noise or away from highway noise in the forest. And what we found was basically as the noise went up, the response went down. So 0 down on the x-axis there is no response and 1 is response. And around like 47, 48 decibels, we got almost a complete drop off in response. And that is not a very, anyone who knows decibels, that's not a very loud sound. That's like the sound of a room of people kind of quietly talking. So we think it might be some kind of like distraction from the noise or something, but it was pretty remarkable. Yeah. So I'll dive into the work up here in Mass, which is a little bit closer to home for most of the folks on the call, but not all, thanks to Zoom. And I worked in the Pioneer Valley, specifically in residential backyards with a great project called Neighborhood Nest Watch, which is a multi-city effort across the US run by the Smithsonian and the Forest Service. People monitor birds in their own backyards. And I built these nest boxes, you could see there in the middle, for house wrens to nest in them. And this was to study how they would respond to simulated increased predator presence in their backyards. So again, thinking about the fear effects and how they respond to it. And birds respond in a number of ways to predators. And one way is that they alter their behavior. And specifically the behavior I was thinking about in this was feeding their nestlings or their young in the nest box. And this is important because they try to feed their nestlings as much as possible so that they grow big. And so when they leave the nest, they're ready to evade predators and eventually migrate. But feeding nestlings is a very conspicuous activity. If you've ever seen a bird feeding a nest, they fly back and forth and back and forth. So by exposing them to predators, we hypothesized that they would slightly reduce the amount of feeding just so that they would present less risk themselves. So we set up this experiment, and keep in mind that don't try this at home, folks. Like you shouldn't be playing predator calls to birds. It is harmful to some extent, and we're very careful about the number of birds that we used, the amount of effect that we did. We got approval from an advisory board, and we made sure that we really limited our impact and that the study was important enough to understand that we did it. So I would say we didn't just go out there willy-nilly and started scaring birds, but to truly understand the system, you have to conduct an experimental manipulation. So what we did was we set up this like playback speaker thing, the camo thing over here, and we played either a control sound, like no one's scared of mourning doves, or predator sounds like hawks and owls right at the nest. And we did this like how they would normally experience it in nature. We didn't bombard them, but we played it like there was an extra predator or two in the environment. And then we monitored the nests and weighed and measured the nestlings to see if that would have an impact on them. And so this is the great part about the job, is that you get to go out again with a lot of training and approvals, handle and measure birds. These are little wren nestlings that I think they're cute. Some people think they're kind of ugly, but you could see their feather development growing in. So we weighed them, and then we measured their wing chord and some other measurements. And we got to take some UMass undergrads out into the field, and they absolutely loved it. And we found some surprising results. So we found about a 10% reduction in nestling body mass across the urbanization gradient. And I'll step back. So we did this in like more urban areas, suburban areas, and rural areas in backyards. So we're thinking about the effects of urbanization in addition to the fear effects that we're adding in there. And we saw like in the most urban areas, the nestlings were about 10% smaller in terms of their weight than in the more rural areas, which was really interesting. And this was like an effect that was apart completely from the playback study that I did. And then we saw just about the same effect in when we played the predator call. So the orange there is the predator call, and the blue is the control call. And on the x-axis, or sorry, the y-axis, we have their mass. And so we saw about a 10% reduction when we introduced these predator calls too. And this is interesting because in a lot of ways, there's a lot more predators in backyards and more urban areas, because again, you have the cats, you have certain hawks that are specialists as well. And so, and then of course the nest predators too, which we didn't play. But so I thought that these findings were interesting, and they really sort of link urbanization and the effect of predators beyond just predators eating things. So predators can have a huge effect on animals just by scaring them basically into changing their behavior, which I thought was really interesting. Sorry, that was a mouthful, but a lot of cool studies.
No, that is really interesting. There's a lot there, and I'm sure that our audience is going to have a lot of really cool questions about that. So please start adding those into the chat. But I do want to just also ask you about if you can briefly describe what you did during your postdoc at Clark, because I know that you took a little bit of a turn for that. And so I want to give a little bit of time to that project as well.
Yeah, sure. Yep. And also, just so you know, I did also put out camera traps to take pictures of mammals. Notice that cat down there has a mouse in its mouth, and we found cats in every backyard, even if people didn't own them. So pretty much everyone. And we found, interestingly, that in the suburbs, there were more species of mammals than anywhere else. So again, that speaks to like how we're changing the environment and how mammals are coming in because we're providing them all sorts of food, whether it be our trash or other things, even birdseed. But yeah, Clark. So after I got into the residential backyard studies, it made me think so much about the why. Why are backyards the way they are? Why do some people decide that they want to have a lush backyard with all sorts of plants? Maybe they're native, maybe they're not. And other people just want a very neat trim grass and then maybe one tree. And so I joined a lab at Clark Department of Geography to look at the social drivers behind residential backyards. And so this was a social science lab. And they have this really cool study they're involved with that is looking at the ecology and social aspects of 6 different cities' residential areas. And again, across a gradient. So they looked at the like city itself and then out into the more rural areas. And here are the cities right here. So Boston is one of them. and they had ecologists look at the plant cover. So we had data about plant cover, and then we also had data about land cover. And then they did a social survey where when they asked people all sorts of questions, both demographic questions, but also sorts of belief questions, where you get your information about gardening, those sorts of things. So when we analyzed the relationship between what people's yards looked like and their social kind of background, and we found some interesting links. So first of all, homeowners associations, and some people probably shivered with fear when I said homeowners associations, because they're like the bane of a lot of people's existence. So when people were under a homeowners association or a neighborhood association, they tended to have less biodiversity in their yards. And that was super interesting. And it really speaks to the power of like institutions and governance, even at the neighborhood level, to really drive how we manage our yards. And again, this was across all these different cities across the country. Obviously, there are huge city differences, like Boston and Phoenix are very different places in terms of their vegetation. But when you control for that, homeowners associations had a huge impact, because they're telling you basically what you're supposed to do. And there's a lot of social pressure to sort of conform to what everyone else's yard looks like when you're under an HOA. Another thing is life stage. So it seemed like older folks tended to have more biodiverse yards, and maybe that was, I don't actually want to speculate on it. There could be a lot of reasons why, but yeah, I was careful not to dive too deep into the reasons, because you really have to, in social science, like conduct interviews to really get at those sorts of questions. And then there was also an economics factor too. So people's, unfortunately, we didn't get a great sample on racial and ethnic lines. So, but there have been other studies showing that people are exposed to less biodiversity based on their race. And a lot of that is legacy effects, such as redlining, where even controlling for the same income, like it could be a middle-class white family and a middle-class black family, but because that neighborhood was segregated back in the day, and not as much attention was paid to planting trees and all that sort of thing, even if they're in the same income bracket, they're exposed to less tree cover and less biodiversity in a lot of ways. So we're starting to explore how those legacies of systemic racism are shaping our country even today in terms of the ecology of cities. And then finally, something super interesting is that when people get their information from your Lowe's, Home Depot, and other gardening stores, they tend to have like less biodiverse yards, which is interesting too. And that's kind of simplifying a bit, but we saw that they had more non-native species and less native species as well.
Wow. So yeah, lots of food for thought there. These are really interesting findings. So we're going to pause for another Q&A. So please add any more questions that you have about Aaron's research into the chat. So I'm going to start here with this one from Harita. So do small mammals prey on bird eggs and nests less in areas they can scavenge from human garbage, or do they preferentially still go for eggs?
Ooh, that's a great question. So this is, we call this resource subsidies. So like the idea is that species are getting subsidies from humans, like they're getting food from us, whether it's intentional, like we're putting food out for them, or unintentional, like we're kind of messy with our trash cans or things like that. And what happens in the city, and this goes back to your earlier point about, do some animals do better? You get, in some cases, artificially inflated populations of certain species. You get maybe fewer species, but the ones that are successful there have higher numbers than you would normally see in nature. But at the same time, we're finding that bird nests tend to be predated less in more urban areas, even though there are higher numbers of potential nest predators. And we call this the predator paradox, or the predation paradox. And I think that my study really gets at the fact that sure, they might not be eating the nestlings or the eggs as much, but they're still having an impact just by being there because they could be having a behavioral effect, a fear effect. So yeah, that was a great question and some unexpected findings there.
Yeah. I have another question in the chat from Will. So he wants to know, he says, it seems like air pollution should be a problem for urban birds. Are the birds you mentioned that are living in cities, like bluebirds and others, somehow able to better deal with the pollution than other birds, specifically air pollution?
Yeah, that's a good question. And honestly, I don't know. I do know there are people working on pollution. I know that there's a lab at William and Mary that works on mercury effects and things like that. But I mean, I can imagine it has an impact on them as they're breathing organisms with lungs. And unfortunately, Springfield, Massachusetts is considered one of the asthma capitals of the nation, and that's because the air pollution is so bad there. So I can imagine that I'm less familiar with the literature on pollution, but I can imagine it does certainly have an effect on wildlife. So great question. Yeah, I would have to look into who studies those sorts of things, but it's really being looked at right now, especially.
Cool. So in the interest of time, we're gonna move on. I have some more questions and then we'll have one last Q&A session at the very end. But I wanted to get a little bit into what you're doing now. So right now you are working for the Department of Energy, right? So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now?
Sure. So this is really exciting. And by the way, we'll leave my contact info later if anyone has some follow-up questions about their backyard birds. But yeah, I sort of took a pivot and I feel like there's so much going on right now and such a pressing need for scientists to get involved in policy. So after this postdoc, I took a fellowship with the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS. They publish Science magazine, and it's called the Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. So it's basically training scientists to work in the policy space and work with policymakers to advance science-based policy decisions, which I think we all want to hear. And currently I'm with the Department of Energy, which has an Office of Science that does basic research in the division I'm in is Earth and Environmental System Sciences. So big ecology questions. Up there on the top left is their spruce experiment, where they're artificially warming a spruce forest and looking at the consequences from the soil and roots all the way up to the plants. And then they also do these giant like Earth system models to get a better idea of the changing climate and more sophisticated and higher resolution models of like what's happening at very regional scales. And then finally, I'm really excited that I'm involved in the 5th National Climate Assessment. So it's a report that comes out mandated by the federal government that is basically a state of the climate report. And it comes out, I think, in 2023. And so I'm working with the Built Environment chapter to make sure that they stay organized and on track and that they have some great engagement workshops and things like that. So it's really cool to be in this space. And I would like to give a huge shout out to Science Cafe too. As a former member of Science Cafe, you get really good at learning how to communicate science to a public audience because you have to work with your speakers and really think about how best to communicate things. So, you know, these sorts of things are very important for early career scientists to learn how to communicate with a broad diversity of viewpoints and stakeholders, because honestly, science isn't the only thing on the table with policymaking. There's a lot of like morals and ethics and other things that are beyond science that have to be thought of too. So bringing in that perspective and thinking about it is really important.
That's definitely true. I agree. So in our last few minutes here, I wanted to talk about kind of things that we as humans can do to help mitigate the effects of urbanization. So what are things that we should be doing and what are things that we should stop doing?
Yeah, so trying to end on a hopeful note. So making your yard, if you have one, or even your, who knows, apartment porch or something, a little wildlife habitat is great. So maybe trying to mow your lawn a little less for pollinators, and planting as many. The big thing for the pollinators and the insect populations and then the birds too is native plants. We're finding over and over again that planting native plants in your yards and nice varieties of them really helps those things out. And there's, I believe the National Wildlife Federation has more information on specifics on how you can make your yard wildlife friendly. There's even a certification process for that. And then also like, building birdhouses and feeding birds. We're not sure quite if that has a great impact on the populations or not, but it also is just really nice for your local birds, and you'll be able to enjoy the wildlife in your backyard as well. So I know in the interest of time, we're gonna have to wrap up soon, but definitely check out wildlife friendly backyards. And there's so many resources out there on what you can do to make your backyard a habitat, basically.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for everybody to sticking around. So I do want to open up just one more Q&A session. So please, if you have any lingering thoughts about anything that we've talked about with Dr. Grade today, please add those into the Q&A. So first up, I have another question from Christina, who is asking what your opinion is on feeding birds.
That's a great question. And it's a hard one to answer, honestly. We're still working on it because on the one hand, a lot of people feed birds. There's billions of, it's a huge industry, like billions of dollars a year goes to bird feeding, and so many people have them in their backyards, but is it really helping? The answer is we don't know, really. We think it might in some cases, but also there's some negative things, like it spreads disease. Like we had a recent outbreak, I think, of a bird disease that might have been linked, potentially, we're not sure, to bird feeders. So like bird feeder hygiene and maintenance is really important. But the answer I always like to give is that if it brings you joy and you love feeding your backyard birds, go for it. I mean, we've messed things up so badly. Helping out your backyard birds isn't the worst thing, but maybe take them down when the bears are coming out.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see, we have two more, I guess, semi-related questions about insects. So the first one you've kind of already hit at. So Deirdre said, how would you help the insect population recover in order to help birds? So you talked about like mowing less and having more diverse plants, but maybe you have something to add to that. And then the second question is, what's your opinion about spraying for mosquitoes?
Yeah, I mean, mosquitoes are a great food source for a lot of species. I'm not a huge fan of mosquitoes, but that's the reality. It's hard because like it's all about your perspective. So like mosquitoes are the #1 killer of humans in the world, of any animal, because of diseases and things like that. So you really need to take it from like sort of a balance. You need to make sure that people's lives are good, but also we want to preserve biodiversity in the environment. So I think in general, limit pesticide use in your backyards, plant lots of nice native plants, maybe mow a little. You could do a low mow lawn where it grows up into almost a grassland, but if your neighbors hate that or HOA wants to shut it down, then maybe be a little bit of a lazy lawnmower, as my advisor, Dr. Susanna Lerman, says, and just mow once every other week. I mean, you could tell your neighbors it's for the pollinators. So there are a lot of things. And then the other thing is to support good agricultural practices and try to push back against land conversion and that sort of thing, because we need to keep our natural areas as intact as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's so many things that we can do, and it seems like in this increasingly urban world, we're going to have more and more interactions with our wildlife. So it sounds like we have to learn how to live with it, right? And how
Yeah,
to
and I'm hopeful that we could strike a balance and have some green in our urban areas, and also like preserve certain areas for species that don't really like our built environment that much.
Absolutely. And hopefully it can be done. Yes. All right, so in the interest of time, we're going to end here. And in case anyone has any unanswered questions, I'm going to invite Aaron to please add his contact information into the chat for you. Our next event is going to have the same format, and it's going to be on December 16th. We're going to be discussing evolution and development with Dr. Dina Navon. So please check out our website, which we will also add to the chat for more information on that. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to fill out our virtual sign-in sheet so that we can hear what topics you're interested in exploring for future cafes. So all of those relevant links, again, are going to hopefully be in the chat for you. And thanks again to Dr. Aaron Grade and to all of you for coming.
Thank you.